Hey everyone, just wanted to go over a couple of items last week, this week, and I'm going to go over the entire quiz. Not a lot of people didn't do great on the quiz, and I think that, um, well, I'll get into it when we look at the quiz, but I think that perhaps you're relying on knowledge that you have from maybe personal experience or something of that nature, which may not be 100% correct. And the reason I say that is because some of these areas are areas that you're doing your final projects on, and I'm seeing that same kind of I don't want to say misinformation because it's not 100% inaccurate, but it's not fully accurate. So I'm seeing some of that in your outlines and in your topics, and I just want to make sure that we're straight and have good knowledge on all of these areas. Health policy, a large part of health policy is Medicare, Medicaid, the reimbursement systems, and that drives obviously money makes the world go round. So money drives healthcare in this country, sadly but true. And so we need to make sure that I want to make sure that you're straight on all of that before we go forward. Um, Also, we talked a little bit about global implementation of health policy, the World Health Organization. If you hadn't heard of WHO before COVID, I'm sure you know who they are now. And they really are an important, I'm glad that as a country we're back involved with them again. And they really are a crucial part of maintaining global population health and kind of monitoring all of that. I mean, I'm a medical coder by training, 30 years ago, um, and still do work in that arena, obviously with compliance, but. There's another kind of subset of medical coding that codes morbidity and mortality statistics to be submitted to the World Health Organization. So we as a country do fully participate. The administration didn't for a while, but the country did still participate in tracking morbidity and mortality stats across our population. We don't submit for everybody, obviously, but we do gather that info, submit it to our state health departments, who then submit to the World Health Organization. Important group to be aware of, and are crucial to health policy on a global perspective. This week we're going to talk about long-term care. I will say, and I know this also kind of dovetails with some of your projects. A couple of you are doing looking at long-term care, quality of care, those types of things in that setting. I'm glad to see that because one of the things that we find is that people forget about this sector. Like, Obamacare, oh, this huge Obamacare plan and the Affordable Care Act. And so what in that did we do to make appropriate long-term care more affordable and increase the quality of care? Next to nothing. I mean, there was not really a lot in there that impacted long-term care. And what's sad is that we really, over time, um, we see more and more problems in this sector, in the long-term care sector. So I'm glad to see that some of you are interested in that setting. We need good, knowledgeable leaders to move into long-term care and make change. We need to improve quality of care. We need to make it affordable for people to live in appropriate care. There's I can say in Pennsylvania alone, for those of you that are in PA, I think most of you are, there are people that are stuck living in group homes or that are living on their own that shouldn't be, mainly because they don't qualify for nursing home care, but they can't afford assisted living or those types of places. In other states, assisted living is paid for through the Medicaid program. So if you make, if you're on a limited income, which most folks are at that point, you may qualify for a Medicaid spend down in a state like Pennsylvania, or sorry, in a state like New York. Granted, they'll, take a lot of your earnings or all of them, most of them, but you'll be in a safe setting and perhaps you'll be able to live in a nice apartment where you can still have somewhat normal lifestyle instead of being cooped up in your house all the time. So I think that there's the point is in Pennsylvania that's not covered. There's no coverage for assisted living. They're called personal care homes typically in Pennsylvania, and can cost anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 a month. It was crazy when we first moved to PA, we thought to move my father-in-law to a personal care home, and it was just like it's not. It wasn't feasible at all. Like it was easily almost 10 times our rent that we were paying there in for a house in Pittsburgh. So it's crazy the cost. But in any case, we have a discussion about that this week. It'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about it. I'm sure some of you may have personal experience with it as well, with parents or grandparents or whomever else that are involved in those types of care settings. You also have your final project, which is a policy brief. I'll remind everyone again, we're looking for a new policy. So, and we're looking for a regulatory policy, so government policy. So not a policy that the CEO writes for a hospital or a nursing home or a physician practice. We're looking for a government policy. It could be a law passed at the federal level. It could be regulation from a federal agency or a state agency. It could be law passed at the state level, regulations or policies at the local level, whatever it might be. Those are all great, but we're looking for policy. We're not looking for a new project or a we're going to start this, dental clinic or something like that. That's not a policy. The funding for that might be a policy, and you can talk about that. So I think the two crucial things are we're looking for governmental policy, federal, state, or local level, and we're looking for not a project. We're looking for a policy and a new one. So it could be something that's completely new, or it could be revisions to an existing policy. I know some of you are going that route. Like there's policy in this area, but it stinks and we don't like it, so we're going to change it. That's fine as well. If you have questions as you're working through, please go back and look at my comments on your original topic, my comments on your outlines from last week. If I say in the little box, see comments on the document, look at the document and see if I put comments there if I said that. If I just said, looks like you're on the right track, blah, 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 then you're on the right track. And I look forward to seeing your projects. Okay, so sorry, this is going to be a long video because, nope, that's not at all what I want. That's not what I want. Make it go away. Sorry, I'm going to end up showing everybody's grades, which is not a good thing. Okay, so let's go here to week 6. And let's take a look at the quiz. I'm just going to pull up the whole quiz because, and so I will say that, and I think most folks do this, if I find that a question didn't perform well on a test, I will certainly consider giving that back. But in a lot of these instances, this is information that's right out of the textbook. So I just don't, even though it maybe didn't perform as well as I had hoped, I still, in good conscience, I can't give it back because it's a question that was right there in the textbook. So first question here, Medicaid is obviously we have multiple. This is what our test looks like in the format when I actually go in to build them. So obviously our questions here, and here are the 4 answers. Our answer here is a state administered insurance plan operated under broad federal guidelines. So Medicaid, it is state. It's a state plan. So that's why I know some of you are looking at Medicaid expansion, etc. The reason that Medicaid expansion didn't occur everywhere is because it was up to a state. Only a little over half of Medicaid is funded from the government, from the federal government. So the state has to make up the rest of that. And if you have Medicaid expansion in a state where it would significantly increase cost, then a Medicaid expansion was problematic because they would have to absorb that cost. A portion of it would be paid by the federal government. And at first, it was a significant portion, but over time, the states would have to absorb that cost. So that's why some states just chose not to go with the Medicaid expansion that came with the Affordable Care Act due to that reason. So it is a state insurance plan, but it's operated under broad federal guidelines, which is very different than Medicare, which is a federal insurance program. So Medicaid is state, Medicare is federal, and that's why if you, just like I was talking about with the nursing or with the assisted living, In New York, state Medicaid pays for assisted living facilities. In Pennsylvania, Medicaid does not pay for assisted living facilities. So it's very much state by state, and what is covered and what is not. Next question. Federal government on average pays what percentage of the cost of the Medicaid program? 57% is about on average what they pay. I can say that as a New York State taxpayer for 45 plus years of my life, I can say that in New York State, it's probably the New York State, each county taxes their residents for Medicaid specifically. So when I paid my county taxes each year for my home and land that I owned, there was a line for county tax, and then there was a line for Broome County Medicaid. So in New York, the folks that live there and own property pay a large amount directly to county governments to manage the Medicaid program. So in New York, probably New York is paying a bit more than the federal government. However, in some other states, like probably big states like here in Florida, or maybe I'm not going to say California because Medi-Cal is a very extensive program. States where they kind of follow the bare bones Medicaid rules, it probably is. Maybe it's even more than 57%. It might be closer to 60 or 65%. So it really varies state to state, but it is very much, there's a little over half is paid for by the federal government, and then the state absorbs the rest of that cost. Next question. All Medicaid beneficiaries are enrolled in managed care plans. I think this question did okay. I think most folks got this right. That is false. Some states don't even have managed Medicaid, but in many states, what they've gone to is kind of a traditional Medicaid program, but then also Medicaid programs that are managed by what are kind of more traditional group health plans. I'm thinking, I think Gateway maybe is in the Pittsburgh area, a managed Medicaid product, but they also have other types of insurance products. So it's Medicaid, but it's a managed care version of Medicaid, meaning that you have a primary care physician, you have to get approvals before you go here and there, and prior authorizations and all that kind of stuff. Whereas general Medicaid, and the reason that we want folks to move into managed care Medicaid is because, unfortunately, this is a national statistic, general traditional Medicaid beneficiaries tend to not have primary care physicians, likely due to issues with access, due to issues with transportation, those types of things. So things that we can fix and hopefully will through these managed care plans. But a lot of the problem is related to the use of the emergency room. So this was a huge problem in New York State that they've been trying to overcome. And I got involved in a project just before I came to RMU, a project to overcome that, in that folks that were coming to the emergency department and kind of using it as primary care. And we've seen that, through examples and films and all of that we present throughout this program, that is a problem nationwide. So by moving folks to managed care, where perhaps unless they have an emergency medical condition, they need to have pre-authorization prior to going to a hospital, perhaps it can help to lessen some of that. And we can get folks better care. I mean, not that ERs don't provide great care, they do, but they're not built to provide primary care. They're built to treat people in traumatic and emergency medical conditions. So it's not meant to be a primary care site. Next question. More than a majority of Medicaid costs are to provide care for the following groups, which makes up less than 25% of the total pool of beneficiaries. So unfortunately, I apologize, there's a typo there. The answer is low-income, elderly, and disabled people. So when you're disabled, Social Security disabled, I guess if you're eligible for Social Security benefits related to disability, or if you are obviously over the age of 65, you are eligible for Medicare, right? So you have Medicare, but if you are low income, you're also eligible for Medicaid. So these are what are known as dual eligibles in the reimbursement world. And so, unfortunately, dual eligibles tend to eat up a good amount of the Medicaid costs just because Medicare's coverage, they work together, but the coverage that Medicare provides for certain items, like, for example, assisted living, which is not covered under Medicare, that kind of stuff, all of those costs would drop to Medicaid. So what they're saying through this question is the majority of the cost goes to benefit the few, which it tends to be the way risk pools work in insurance. And I don't know that we've ever gotten into any of that discussion in any of our classes in this program. I know we do in the grad program, but the you know that's why we have risk pools for insurance. So there are people that use a lot of benefits, there are people that use a few amount of benefits. Everyone pays in the same. Some people take, they're able to take more advantage of the fact that there are folks in the risk pool that don't ever see a doctor and don't ever need to use their benefits. It all balances out. It doesn't really work that way with Medicaid, unfortunately, because there isn't as much money flowing in. There are no premiums paid, etc. But so those folks, low income, elderly, and disabled folks, those dual eligibles, tend to be the ones that cause the most cost to the system. Next question. All children that are eligible for CHIP or Medicaid are automatically enrolled. This is not true. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, there is no automatic enrollment in anything. So if people are eligible, they do need to take the effort to apply. In most cases, the hospitals, like, for example, if parents came in and brought a child to the hospital, the child was uninsured. The requirements for CHIP are a little more lenient than for Medicaid. So perhaps the family doesn't qualify for Medicaid, but maybe the kids would qualify for CHIP. So usually those discussions are had between the patient financial staff, registration staff, and the parents. And the hospital will usually help a patient to complete that application and get coverage for their kids if they're eligible. But it doesn't happen. Nothing happens automatically, unfortunately. Even for Medicare coverage, you need to make a choice. Are you going to enroll in Medicare? Or are you not going to enroll in Medicare? Same thing for CHIP and Medicaid. People need to make the effort to get coverage for themselves. But we have built some systems that help folks to navigate that system, because they're not easy. It's not an easy process. It's not just like, oh, here, I want this. Yeah, you have to provide a ton of financial documentation, taxes, and W-2s, and all that kind of stuff. So can be difficult. So no one is automatically enrolled in anything, really, from a governmental coverage perspective. Next question. Inability for a rival drug company to make a generic version of a brand name drug for 20 years from the time of initial development is due to. This is due to patent protection. So when a company creates a new drug, they patent that. There's a patent on it, which means that nobody else can make that drug. So if you are taking a drug that's a brand new drug, just new on the market, you will be taking the brand name version of that drug. And then after 20 years, then generic makers can start to make that. In some instances, the brand name folks will waive the patent protection and will allow generic drug makers to begin making drugs sooner than that. But an example. There is a birth control pill called Loestrin, and Loestrin was a very popular birth control option. It provided a low level of estrogen, so it was good for folks that had high blood pressure and dealing with things that may make them not as appropriate for birth control. So Lowestern was reaching the end of its patent period, so meaning that folks would start to be able to make a generic version of it. And lo and behold, the company came out with a slightly modified version of that same drug called loloestrin. And so you may be familiar with loloestrin as well if you work in that field, or maybe you take it. Loloestrin is pretty much the same as loestrin, but is protected for another 20 years. So they only that company can sell loloestrin for the next, well, not 20 years now. It's been a while since that occurred, but so it's interesting. You'll see drug companies kind of play that a little bit, that patent protection guideline there. Next question. Drugs that are similar in chemical composition to other existing protected drugs, but are different enough molecularly based on federal guidelines to constitute a new drug application, are known as Me Too drugs. So probably not the most politically correct name anymore, just given the Me Too movement that occurred a couple of years back. But that is what they're called. Typically what it is a, you know, this drug is really similar to that drug, but this drug company wants to patent it as well. So Me Too, we want the money too. So that's kind of why they're called that. But yeah, Me Too drugs is the option there. And I don't remember how many folks got that wrong. So I don't think that was a huge issue on the test. Probably because you read that and you're like, Me Too drugs. Wow, that doesn't seem appropriate, but that is what it's called. So, question 8. For many, the majority of continuing medical education hours earned by physicians and providers are sponsored by pharmaceutical companies. For any of you that I've worked in the physician practice setting or even in like the emergency department, you know how often those farm sales reps come in with free food and, goodies for the doc and all of that stuff. Huge compliance issues associated. But one thing that pharmaceutical companies commonly do, and if you work in a physician practice, you're probably familiar, is offer fancy dinners. I actually got to go to one. I went kind of incognito down to Capitol Grill, downtown Pittsburgh. Probably $85, $90 dinner. Wine was flowing. People could have, I don't eat steak, but people could have like whatever steak they wanted. I had fish, and it was all paid for by the pharmaceutical company. And they talked about a medical topic, which happened to be one that was interesting to me. And I had a friend that was going that is a provider. So I went with them. And it's free and you don't pay for it. And you get CMEs if you're a doc. So that happens all the time. And we've tried to put a stop to it. Because it really does. The concern is that it modifies prescribing patterns. So if you're, I remember, I'll just use Pfizer because it's a name that everyone knows and is familiar with right now. But Pfizer gave me that free meal, and this drug's made by Pfizer. Even though that other drug might work just as well, I'm going to prescribe the Pfizer drug instead because then they'll make more money off that. So that's the fear. I think most providers would tell you that they don't care. They're just there for the CMEs and the free food, and they don't pay that much attention. But subconsciously it might impact them. So there are laws in place regarding, obviously any kickback, those types of things in place. And also there is guidance from the Office of Inspector General related to taking stuff from pharmaceutical companies and their behavior. It did alter it somewhat, and some large organizations do not allow farm reps to bring things in anymore. 20 years ago, when I worked as a compliance officer, my first job as a compliance officer, we put a stop to it in that facility, and that still stands today. So it can work. It's just, the docs will still take advantage of stuff on their own time. It's their own time. They can choose to do what they want. But just be aware, the vast majority of CME is sponsored by farm companies. Now living in Florida, there's tons of conferences here that are just exactly that. Like docs come down here free of charge. I don't know if their flights are covered or not, but they stay in the swank hotels, the JW Marriott and the Ritz-Carlton, those places, and go to a couple days of learning and some golf and, maybe bring their families and go to the parks. Happens constantly down here, all funded by medical device companies, pharmaceutical companies, etc. Next question. Managed care plans will implement formularies in an attempt to. So managed care plans, I don't think this was don't think too many people got this one wrong, in an attempt to control the cost of pharmaceuticals. So for example, I have absolutely horrible health coverage now. My RMU coverage was awesome, and now I can't access that anymore. So I have horrible coverage, but they won't pay for. I used to take a shot for migraines every month. The shot itself was it's almost $2,000, but the pills that I take to stop the migraine once it starts are about $150 a piece. So if I have 30 migraines in a month, it'll cost them a lot more than the $2,000 that it that they would pay for, and they don't pay that much of it anyway. That's just the cost. But in any case, my formulary for this new plan doesn't include that, and so I can't have it anymore unless I want to pay $2,000 out of pocket a month and not have any of that go toward my $3,500 deductible. So formularies are an attempt to control cost, but unfortunately, and I think that probably the book talked about this a bit. Unfortunately, it impacts patients in a real way. Maybe a patient's been on a drug for 30 years and now they go to a new insurance plan, new formulary, they can no longer take that drug. So it is problematic, and formularies need to be more open to appropriate what physicians feel are appropriate drugs for patients to take. Last question. Prior to the Medicare Modernization Act, there was no coverage under the traditional Medicare program for prescription drugs. This is true. So prior to 2003, prescription drugs were not covered by Medicare at all, unless it was something that you were given in the hospital, like an injection infusion, or in the physician practice injection infusion kind of thing. So just important to be aware of that. So that's it. I'm at a ton of time, so I'll just stop talking here. But hopefully you understand a little better some of those topics from the quiz, and maybe a little bit more of long-term care and Medicaid and whatnot that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. If you have any questions while you're working through your final project, please let me know. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all in the classroom this week. Thanks.